Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to this event organized and sponsored by the Center for Arts and Humanities and the Sheikh Zayed Chair for Arabic and Islamic Studies here at the American University of Beirut. I invite you to follow us on social media, to follow our YouTube channels, and also register your email if you want to be invited to other events organized by the Center for Arts and Humanities. Zaina has a handout that she'll pass for this. And today, it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Mariam Saeed El-Ali, a scholar whose work has significantly contributed to our understanding of memory, history, and narration in the Islamic tradition. Mariam and I go back a long way. It was actually here at AUB that we met with the help of our dear teacher, As'ad Khairallah. He introduced us, and I first met her when she was a master's student here at AUB. I was first-year assistant professor. And since then, I have had the privilege of following her intellectual journey. It has been truly remarkable to witness her growth into the distinguished scholar she is today. Mariam earned her doctorate in Arabic language and literature at AUB in 2017 under the supervision of Professor Tarif Al-Khalidi. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا طَرِيف Al-Khalidi. He was the previous Sheikh Zayed Chair of Arabic and Islamic Studies here at AUB and a phenomenal scholar of Islamic history. We owe him a lot. So he was her PhD advisor, and this dissertation was recognized with the Abdul Hadi Dibis Award for Academic Excellence. It was later published as a book by the Orient Institute in Beirut in the Beirut Text and Studies series, Akhbar Khadija bint Khuwaylid in the Islamic Sources, Frames of Narration, Memory, and History. It's a deeply thoughtful and rigorous study of how Khadija, the first wife of the Prophet, is remembered in Islamic historiography. Images of Khadija, somehow. I was particularly struck by the way Mariam approached this subject, this sensitive subject, carefully navigating the intersections of memory, textual framing, and historical consciousness. Mariam's research continues to engage with questions of memory and transmission, particularly in medieval Islamic scholarship. Her current project, and the lecture today is a piece of that project, and she already promised it to the University Press. I have the University Press represented here, so prepare yourself. Her current project, Memory at Work in Medieval Islamic Scholarship, explores how memory operates within the Quranic discourse and the ways in which medieval Muslim scholars conceptualized and engaged with it. Her inquiry into the links between memory, knowledge production, and cultural identity promises to open new perspectives on how Islamic intellectual traditions were shaped over time. So it's the shaping of the tradition that she's interested in. Beyond her scholarship, Mariam has been an engaged teacher, sharing her knowledge at both AUB and University St. Joseph. She teaches in our Islamic Studies online program, Quranic Studies and Sources and Methods as well. She was also the recipient of the Andrew Mellon Foundation postdoctoral fellowship at the Center for Arts and Humanities. So we really are welcoming you to where you belong, to where you've been already. It's always rewarding to see a scholar develop in ways that remain true to their intellectual curiosity while constantly expanding the scope of their inquiry. Mariam is one such scholar, thoughtful, rigorous, and deeply engaged in her work. I'm delighted to welcome her today. Please join me in welcoming Mariam El-Ali to me.
Thank you so much, Professor Orfili, for this insightful introduction. And thank you all for being here today. Before I begin, I must express how deeply humbling it is to see respected professors who once mentored me in the audience today. I feel very privileged by your presence. To initiate this discussion, I would like to start by quoting the Quranic verse included in the poster for this lecture. وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And reminding is good for the believers. This instruction to remind others appears repeatedly in the Quran, with one verse referring to the Prophet simply as a reminder. فَذَكِّرْ إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُذَكِّرْ. So remind, for you but are a reminder. Establishing a close duality between the Prophet and the revelation, the Quran also portrays itself as fundamentally serving the purpose of reminding. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. This is but a remembrance to mankind. In fact, it is here fascinating to observe that in Arabic, dhikr and dhukr exist. So dhikr and dhukr. In contrast to dhukr, a term that refers to the internal remembrance of something within the heart, dhikr signifies the open oral articulation of the subject being recalled. With this understanding, the interactive characteristic of the action is integrated into the terminology itself. To put it differently, the Quranic dhikr and dhikra represent active forms of remembrance, distinct from the silent nostalgia experienced by a heartbroken lover, for example, such as the individual recollection or dhukra of the 7th century Arab poet Ka'b bin Zuhair when he envisions the shadow of his beloved. أن ألم بك الخيال يطيف ومطافه لك ذكرة وشعوف. So if you even forget something, so say you are practicing dhukr, not dhikr. Likewise, the interactive interpretation is contained within the form or wazn of the word tadhakur, which we will now examine closely. The form tafa'ul embodies the meaning of sharing, which allows us to define tadhakur as an activity involving shared recollection. In fact, this interactive aspect of the action proved challenging to be expressed as inventively in a single English term when compared to its Arabic equivalent. How can one accurately interpret the word tadhakur in the English language? Broadly speaking, it is possible to render it as co-remembering. And in a more targeted domain, it might align with the concept of conversational remembering. Hence, the form of memory which tadhakur entails exists between subjects and not within them. Its form of existence consists of communication. Tadhakur denotes an interactive remembrance through conversation between two or more agents. The terminology may also suggest reciprocal encouragement to orally bring up and discuss a particular notion or event, where memory is not triggered by a contact between a remembering mind and a reminding object, but contact between two or more conversing or remembering minds. Our efforts to dissect Tadhakur generate a wealth of thought-provoking questions, steering us in a variety of methodological directions. A study of the textual materials that include references to Tadhakur within certain Arabo-Islamic sources might formulate the following considerations. Which memories were brought to mind? What was remembered? What factors contributed to their recollection? Why was this or that event remembered? Which individuals participated in the act of remembering? Who remembered? Did the remembering processes affect the evoked notions or event? How they were remembered? So in the upcoming analysis, and in the context of the aforementioned questions, I will explore textual illustrations that exemplify Tadhakur, an interactional organization of shared remembering that is largely unexplored. In this endeavor, I attempt to investigate the multi-layered epistemological, literary, and social aspects that this concept offers. It is reasonable to suggest at the outset that Tadhakur is a term that has existed for a long time, potentially as far back as the celebrated Basus War. According to the Dawha Historical Dictionary of Arabic, the earliest recorded use of the term can be traced back to Al-Harith bin Ubad, the renowned pre-Islamic poet and leader. It stands to reason that Tadhakur in Al-Harith's verse is directed towards the days of the Arabs, Al-Ayyam, the name given in Arabian lore to those combats that the Arabian tribes fought amongst themselves. وَإِذَا الْكِرَامُ تَذَاكَرَتْ أَيَّامَهَا كُنْتُمْ عَلَى الْأَيَّامِ غَيْرَ كِرَامِ. In the context of the heroic epoch of Jahiliyyah, one can logically infer that a communal remembrance of those days was to be expected. The spirited competition and chivalric values that characterized the ancient Arabian warriors should be viewed as essential contributors to the Tadhakur process. In this sense, memories and narratives are only a continuation of those battles, where rival tribes strive to establish their superiority. Al-Harith's poem is in fact a counter-qasida in response to a famous ode, Mimiyya, by Al-Muhalhil, brother to Kulayb Wa'il, who acts a leading part in the Basus War. One should also note here that popular memory kept the recollection of these battles alive for centuries in legendary fashion. I myself still remember my grandmother's storytelling of Azir Salim's romance, none other than Muhalhil himself. As per my grandmother, Azir kept his combat helmet for 4 decades, to the point where it became impossible to remove. It is thus not a distant tribal identity that has faded into history, but rather a collective Arab identity that continues to thrive through the legacy of ancestors. Tadhakur might also reflect the reawakening of a long-desired revenge, as illustrated by the case of Qais ibn al-Khatim, another renowned poet and notable from Al-Aws tribe, who was killed only 2 years ahead of the Hijrah. In كتاب أسماء المغتالين من الأشراف وأسماء من قتل من الشعراء by Muhammad bin Habib, we read that Al-Khazraj conversed about him, about Qais. So they complained among each other and agreed on killing him. فلما هدأت حرب الأنصار تذاكرت الخزرج قيس بن الخطيم ونكايته فتذامروا وتواعدوا قتله. Observe the series of actions here of تذاكر, تذامر, and تواعد. تذاكر here signifies the primary act that initiates revenge and killing, instead of a later recalling of the past confrontations. This تذاكر is fundamentally a malicious behavior. So نعوذ بالله من التذاكر الشرير. Back to Quran again. Upon reviewing the following verse, فاذكروا الله كذكركم آباءكم أو أشد ذكرا. Remember God as you remember your own parents, or even more intensely. It becomes clear how vital the remembrance of their lineage and past was to the Arabs. The Quranic expression reflects a mild approach and refrains from demanding a sudden end to the practice. One could infer the deep-seated nature of this tradition among them, given that the Quran did not instruct them to abruptly stop remembering their ancestors, but offered a gradual replacement. So imagine an Arab sitting around a campfire, saying, "You think your grandfather was great? Let me tell you about mine." So it's literally it's بي أقوى من بيك, you know? Okay. An important feature of the practice revealed by this verse is the ingrained masculine bias that characterizes it. So ما بنقول أمي أقوى من أمك, we say بي أقوى من بيك. Even though the verb أذكروا can refer to female listeners, it seems that the Quran predominantly addresses men engaging in the recollection of their paternal figures. One might wonder whether the mentions of tadhakur found within the various sources also reflect a comparable male-dominated viewpoint. In fact, yes, it does. The sole instance of tadhakara that includes the feminine marker ta'nith that I encountered pertains to Quraysh, so tadhakarat Quraysh. And guess what? It is said to being co-remembered. Ansabaha or ahsabaha in another version. Nevertheless, when primary sources do not capture women's active roles in conversational memory, it is still women who narrate some of the most remarkable of these occurrences. A prominent hadith where the Prophet engages in tadhakur likely leads to an obvious identification of the woman who transmitted it. In conversation, the Prophet and Abu Bakr are said to recall their age, and who better than Aisha to recount this narrative? A woman who would take center stage rather than fade into the background. So this hadith reveals a key aspect of tadhakur, namely the matching pairing of the parties participating in the process. The text appears to depict a real conversation between the Prophet and Abu Bakr, in which they reflected on their ages. So this might be regarded as an old case of two friends sitting down and saying, "Can you believe how old we are getting?" So it's like, "Wallah kibirna ya Abu Bakr." It is evident, though, that the meanings associated with this supposed exchange are amplified in later quotations of this hadith. The close relationship between the two men, the matching, the correspondence that enables the interactive function of memory retrieval are emphasized within the context. The involvement of the Prophet and the Tadhakur, whatever the remembered topic, endows the other party, Abu Bakr here, with considerable charismatic authority. Even though the hadith is typically invoked to draw attention to the fact that they both died at a remarkably comparable age, a detail that is frequently viewed as a significant marker of their deep connection and alignment. The act of tadhakur itself, however, carries the same connotation and implication. Reflecting on the central reciprocal nature of the act, it is reasonable to assert that the Prophet would engage in tadhakur solely with those who are in a way or another aligned and compatible with him, rather than just with anyone. Hamza bin Abd al-Muttalib, the Prophet's uncle, takes on the position of the second party in a parallel tadhakur anecdote, for example, with the Prophet being the individual that corresponds to him. And it is particularly interesting that a woman also, Khawla bin Qais, Hamza's wife, serves as the narrator of this anecdote as well. The Prophet and Hamza are reported to co-remember the word ad-dunya. Through a more expansive perspective, investigating reports that feature the Prophet's companions or Sahaba involved in tadhakur uncovers the emergence of the newly Islamic identity at its very nascent stage. Those catch the companions of the Prophet conversing about new religious directives. Here, tadhakur suggests a communicative memory, an everyday act, spontaneous and raw, where the Muslims discuss first-hand religious knowledge. Consider, for example, the report that highlights the recollection of Ali, Ammar, and Al-Miqdad as they jointly recall the purification measure that is needed after the secretion of the male seminal fluid, al-madhi, associated with sexual arousal. There are indeed bolder accounts of companions reflecting on their sexual experiences. You may wish to revisit the sources yourself to explore some of these accounts. I'm focusing on this one example to assure that this isn't the last time Bilal Urfali will ever invite me to a lecture. So, as per this report, the shy Ali hesitates to pose the question to the Prophet concerning the issue due to his marital relationship with his daughter. The question directed towards the Prophet clearly indicates that the tadhakur in this scenario aimed to find a resolution for the concern that was brought to mind. The Prophet articulates a solution that mirrors the ablution observed before prayer, al-wudu. In a related situation, influential members of the tabi'un are noted to reflect on analogous concerns pertaining to the conditions that mandate ablution or wudu. Similarly, a saying from the Prophet serves as a reference in addressing the recalled conditions. Other reports advance the subject of al-anfal, with Sa'id bin al-Musayyib being questioned regarding it. So it is like a group project In college, everyone brings a different detail to the table, and sometimes you end up with more debates than clear answers, especially when you consider the time the Prophet was available to answer compared to what came after. Sometimes it was as if we switched from short answers to full symposiums. These anecdotes of communicative tadhakur demonstrate that Muslims during this formative period were starting to reflect on the alterations to their way of life instigated by the new religion. As for the tadhakur itself, one can contend that a new paradigm was developing. For while these and similar reports seem to arise spontaneously and resonate primarily with the named individuals involved in the tadhakur processes, a shift occurred later towards more established and organized examples. The impression conveyed to readers is that the content does not revolve around haphazard, disconnected anecdotes of tadhakur events, but rather emphasizes the inception of a noteworthy practice that is about to take shape. In this regard, it remains uncertain and unclear exactly when the phrase tadhakur al-ilm was first introduced, leaving us with a sense of ambiguity regarding its origin. Nonetheless, it undeniably signified the initiation of a scholarly perception of tadhakur. Ilm is a term of many correlations that shift in accordance with different contexts, including but not limited to theological, literal, philosophical perceptions. Broadly speaking, it means knowledge, the opposite of jahl, ignorance, and is connected with hilm. And on the other hand, it evokes a number of terms which denote more precise definitions, such as ma'rifah, fiqh, hikmah, shu'ur. We will shortly examine this subject, exploring the specific meaning of the term in the context of this expression, that of tadhakur al-ilm. But let us now turn our attention to a statement attributed to Ibn Abbas, al-Hibr, the doctor, or al-Bahr, the sea, because of his doctrine, in which he advocates for tadhakur al-ilm rather than nighttime worship. وقال قتادة قال ابن عباس تذاكر العلم بعض ليلة أحب إلي من إحيائها. This declaration is poised to achieve widespread recognition and citation. The expression, which lacks a clear agent for the action, conveys the notion of a suggested practice, of an advisable routine, or a tradition that ought to be adhered to, put in the mouth of Ibn Abbas, who is regarded as one of the greatest scholars, if not the greatest, of the first generation of Muslims. Therefore, it is not particularly significant to consider the specific individuals who are engaged in the act of remembering, nor it is crucial to focus on the precise details of what is being recalled. Instead, what truly stands out and deserves emphasis is the very practice of the action itself, which is brought to the forefront. So if you ever find yourself in a late night scholarly discussion, just remember that Ibn Abbas would approve of that. The concept of tadhakur seems to transcend individual communicative events, favoring a more extensive and suggested scholastic cultural practice. On the other hand, and this is frequently seen in Arabic literature, that such indistinct expressions do not go without explanation, without analysis, supported by later citations. So what kind of insight or ilm is intended here? The overall comprehension of the term is notably pointed by the response provided by Ahmad bin Hanbal, the Imam of Baghdad, the celebrated theologian and traditionist, and one of the most vigorous personalities of Islam. Ibn Hanbal, the founder of one of the four major Sunni schools, asserts in his detailed interpretation of this specific saying that it is knowledge that assists individuals in addressing their religious concerns. So it is العلم الذي ينتفع به الناس في أمر دينهم, i.e. the understanding of Islamic law related to practices such as prayer, fasting, divorce, and among other matters. This traditionalist viewpoint is, interestingly, pushed even further when the term ilm is replaced by hadith. The expression Tadhakur al-Hadith is, for example, presented as a section title in Al-Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, a renowned Iraqi hadith traditionalist and historian who came of a family of religious scholars, where hadiths under the mentioned title are cited to accentuate the importance of conversing traditions. The practice of tadhakur in this context plays a crucial role in consolidating the identity of hadith pupils and scholars alike. After all, what other activities are they meant to pursue besides seeking out hadith through every possible avenue? And one effective method for achieving this is by collectively recalling and discussing hadith in a group setting. Tadhakur is thus a valuable gesture that one hadith transmitter can extend to the other by bringing to mind a hadith that the other has overlooked. Hence, upon the meeting and co-remembering of hadith by Ibn Abi Layla and Abdullah bin Shaddad, one individual allegedly expressed gratitude to another for reminding him of a hadith that had slipped from his memory. يرحمك الله فرب حديث أحييته في صدري كان قد مات. مذاكرة serves as another twin term of tadhakur and is also paired with ilm. مذاكرة is beautifully compared to the essential water that is crucial for nurturing and cultivating the blossoming flower of knowledge within the fertile soil of our hearts. القلوب ترب والعلم غرسها والمذاكرة ماؤها. فإذا انقطع عن الترب ماؤها جف غرسها. This said, and as you sit here, it is quite possible that you are contemplating that these repetitive scholastic experiences of tadhakur have been dull and monotonous. And I truly hope that you have not found yourself feeling bored at this stage of my presentation. In fact, engaging with the information through the process of memory serves as a captivating expedition for those who are devoted to acquiring knowledge, a truth that any authentic scholar who harbors a deep commitment to learning will recognize. Notable scholars and hadith transmitters are even identified for reaching the verge of losing their mind when they engage in the practice of مذاكرة. كادت تذهب عقولهم عند المذاكرة. Primarily due to their intense and passionate attachment to this particular activity من شدة شهوتهم له يعني للمذاكرة. This bears a resemblance to the introspective days typical of Sufi dhikr in many aspects as well. So here we are talking about being passionate about your work. If only like modern students had this level of excitement. Imagine, for example, someone fainting from enthusiasm during a university lecture. So the profound satisfaction and delight that it imparts to the spirit is so strikingly powerful that it has in fact aroused the envy of a person of significant stature like the Buwayhid Wazir, Abu al-Fadl ibn al-Amid, himself known as Al-Jahid al-Thani. In contemplating a mudhakara between Sulaiman bin Ahmad al-Tabarani and Abu Bakr al-Ji'abi, he was fortunate enough to attend at his court. Ibn al-Amid declares that it was a moment when he realized that his belief in the unparalleled sweetness of his top-level official rules was mistaken. ما كنت أظن أن في الدنيا حلاوة ألذ من الرئاسة والوزارة التي أنا فيها حتى شاهدت مذاكرة سليمان بن أحمد الطبراني وأبي بكر الجعابي بحضرتي. This insightful saying ascribed to Ibn al-Amid brings to the forefront the crucial importance of literary patronage, of the inviting environment that courts offered, which allowed scholars to flourish and cultivate their knowledge and talents. Courts were not just literary salons or venue for light-hearted entertainment. They were in fact important spaces where the serious and committed pursuit of knowledge is not only practiced but also joyfully acknowledged and revered. Attendees of As'ad Khairullah's lectures from 2 weeks ago might recall the two terms he discussed, musamara and musha'ara. Remember? Dr. Khairullah maintained that the conversational exchange of poetry and entertaining themes represents a distinctive quality of classical Arabic literary tradition. As I approach the conclusion of this discussion, I wish to add that the practice of tadhakur or mudhakara serves as a further manifestation of this quality. By incorporating a variety of themes that go beyond amusing conversations, one can argue that tadhakur or mudhakara exemplifies an even more holistic practice that balances entertainment with serious discourse. Indeed, we have a long tradition in Arabic literature of mingling jidd with hazl, seriousness and joking, a common combination of antithetical terms that might blend to the extent of a hazl yuradu bihi jidd, joking which aims to express seriousness. The variety of themes Tadhakur explores, which exhibit a degree of enjoyment and which are found in disjointed reports across Adab or Bal-Latr compilation, incorporates, for example, fitna. So Tadhakur al-fitna, also idols, asnam al-jahiliya, keeping secrets, كتمان السر تذاكر ناس من أهل الفضل كتمان السر, envy, hasad, among others. And indeed, they merit a separate examination. In contrast, the notion of tadhakur al-ilm or hadith appears to be a far more frequently encountered and explicitly delineated theme, one that is systematically organized within recognized scholastic collections. It is a notion that functions as a reference around which a much more substantial body of anecdotes progressively amassed and evolved over time. And as tadhakur and remembering in general is a realization of belonging, of defining self-identity, we ought to remain aware of this significant aspect of our tradition. That of the persistent communicative feature that transcends entertaining circles and existed as a standard among scholars belonging to various sects, schools, and affiliations. Therefore, we read of a Maliki judge reportedly saying, I conversed, tadhakartu, with a Shafi'i scholar. We encounter, for example, Al-Imam Al-Awza'i prevailing Al-Imam Malik in Maghazi, while the latter prevailing him in fiqh, upon a lengthy tadhakur that lasted for an entire afternoon. وقد تذاكر مالك والأوزاعي بالمدينة من الظهر حتى صليا العصر ومن العصر حتى صليا المغرب فغمره الأوزاعي في المغازي وغمره مالك في الفقه. It was a completely non-threatening endeavor to gain rights from others, even when the other individual is affiliated with a different group or holds a lesser degree of expertise. Seeking knowledge was, as the wise Tarif Khalidi once taught me, a continued conversational endeavor, mas'an hiwari. With tadhakur, the objective is not just to revisit or highlight previous situations. Rather, it is fundamentally about coming together to forge a common understanding and agreement concerning future paths. So, فلنتذاكر هذا الأمر. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariam, for this tadhakur. Perhaps we should rename our literary salons as tadhakur. And you really saved this term from being forgotten. And I will never ever look at tadhakur, without remembering you.
Good to hear.
I'm actually reading now Tariq Al-Aris' memoir, Water on Fire, and in it he talks about memory, about living through the war, living with war, but also remembering war, and the remembrance that we do together. It's the communal aspect of remembrance, which actually, the word tadhakur, captures very nicely.